The town of Dust Creek in the 1800s was a place where fortunes rose and fell overnight. Men gambled their ranches, women fought for respect, and the law often turned a blind eye. In the midst of this struggle lived Clara Hayes, a young woman with a burden heavier than most. Her father had died, leaving behind debts he could not pay, and the town saw her as nothing more than a poor girl cursed by misfortune. Everywhere she walked, whispers followed her. "She's a burden," they said. "She'll never climb out of that pit." Clara worked from sunrise to sunset. She scrubbed floors in the saloon, stitched clothes for neighbors who underpaid her, and even baked bread in the evenings to sell for a few cents. Yet no matter how much she earned, it vanished into the pockets of creditors. Some men mocked her, others pitied her, but none offered true kindness. Clara kept her head high, though her spirit carried wounds unseen. She often wondered if life on the frontier was meant only for the strong, or if the weak were destined to be trampled. One hot afternoon, when the dust rose high along the trail, a rider entered Dust Creek. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in fine clothes for a cowboy, his hat new, his boots polished, and his stallion worth more than the sheriff's pay. His name was Samuel Carter, one of the wealthiest ranchers in 3 counties. Rumor said he owned half the cattle in New Mexico territory. To some, he was a man of arrogance. To others, he was a mystery. But when he stepped into town that day, his sharp eyes found Clara immediately. At the general store, Clara stood arguing with the shopkeeper, who refused to sell her flour on credit. "You already owe too much, Clara," the man snapped. "Come back when you have coin." Samuel, watching from the doorway, noticed how the crowd outside laughed quietly at her humiliation. Clara clutched her worn basket. Her cheeks flushed red, but she did not cry. She simply turned to leave, head held high. It was then Samuel stepped forward, laying a gold coin on the counter. "Give the lady her flour," he said coolly. "And add sugar, too." The store fell silent. Clara turned to the stranger, eyes wide. "I didn't ask for your charity," she whispered sharply. Samuel tipped his hat. "Didn't say it was charity. A man with more than he needs can afford to share." Clara walked out with her flour. Her pride both stung and softened. That evening, she baked bread with the goods and delivered loaves around town, never mentioning the cowboy's kindness. But Samuel watched her from the shadows of the saloon porch, intrigued by her fire, her dignity, and the way she carried burdens that would have broken others. Days turned to weeks, and Samuel found excuses to linger near Clara. He brought his cattle into town, purchased supplies at the same time she did, and once even tipped her when she mended his shirt with careful stitches. The townsfolk began whispering again, this time with sharper tongues. Why would a rich man bother with her? They sneered. She's nothing but a debt-ridden burden. Clara heard them but ignored it. She refused to believe a wealthy rancher had any interest in her life. Still, his gaze followed her, steady and quiet, like a man with intentions unspoken. One evening, Clara collapsed outside her cabin after a long day. The creditors had come again, threatening to take what little she owned. Samuel, passing by on horseback, dismounted quickly and helped her inside. He found her pale and trembling, exhaustion clear in her face. "You can't go on like this," he said firmly. Clara shook her head. "I've no choice. My father's debts are mine. The town calls me a burden, but I'll not beg for mercy." Samuel looked at her, admiration burning in his chest. "You're no burden, Clara. You're the strongest soul I've met." The next morning, Dust Creek gathered at the sheriff's office. A public auction was to be held. Clara's small cabin and land seized to pay off what remained of her debts. She stood trembling but proud, ready to lose the only home she had. The crowd jeered, some whispering cruel jokes. The auctioneer cleared his throat, preparing to sell her life piece by piece. But before the first bid could be called, Samuel stepped forward, a folded deed in his hand. "There will be no auction," he declared. "This land is hers, paid in full." Gasps swept the crowd. The sheriff frowned, unfolding the paper. It was true. Samuel had purchased Clara's debts in secret, and now he handed her the title to her land, free and clear. Clara's breath caught in her throat, tears welling in her eyes. "Why?" she whispered, stunned. Samuel smiled faintly. "Because the world called you a burden. But I see a woman worth more than gold, more than land, more than pride itself. I won't stand by while they tear you down." The town fell silent, shame flickering in their eyes as they realized the truth. Clara clutched the title to her chest, unable to speak. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of debt lifted from her shoulders. The crowd dispersed, muttering, while Samuel tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her to process what he had done. That night, Clara wept, tears not of sorrow but of gratitude and release. She prayed softly, thanking God for sending a protector in the unlikeliest of men, and deep in her heart she felt a warmth she had not known since her father's passing, the warmth of hope, flickering like a new dawn. Weeks later, Clara's life began to change. Free from debt, she expanded her small cabin, planted a garden, and baked bread not out of desperation but joy. The townsfolk, once cruel, began treating her with respect, though guilt lingered in their eyes. And Samuel Carter, the man who had freed her, continued to visit. He brought cattle hides for her to sew, books from distant towns, and laughter to her quiet evenings. Slowly, Clara realized his gift had not been about charity. It had been about belief in her worth when no one else saw it. On a warm summer night, Samuel stood on Clara's porch, gazing out at the horizon. "I gave you land because I knew you deserved it," he said softly. "But land alone won't give you happiness. I want to give you something more if you'll have it." Clara looked at him, her heart racing. "What more could you give?" she asked, though deep down she already knew. Samuel took her hand gently. "A partner, a life, someone to stand beside you when the world calls you less. You're not a burden, Clara. You're the woman I want by my side." Tears filled her eyes, but this time she did not hide them. Clara had spent years believing she was worthless, crushed under debt and ridicule. But here stood a man who saw her strength, her resilience, her worth. She nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, Samuel, yes." And in that moment, under the vast Wild West sky, a new chapter began, not of debt and despair, but of love and partnership. The story of Clara Hayes spread through Dust Creek and beyond. Folks no longer called her a burden, they called her blessed. For in the harsh land of the frontier, where survival often bred cruelty, a rich cowboy had given more than gold. He had given dignity, freedom, and love to a woman who deserved it. And together, they built not just a ranch, but a life filled with laughter, respect, and hope. A legacy that proved the worth of a heart cannot be measured in debt or coin,